Quilt data review and how to version your data using Quilt data for Python on AWS S3. So why do we need to version data? Well, because same reasons as we version our source code. We want to collaborate within team, share this common some sort of common data. We want to be able to revert fully to the previous state. For example, we have a folder, we have some files, and there are certain steps in which the files make sense together. And so we want to version all the files at the same time. And we want to be able to make changes, to review changes. For example, for debugging reasons, some issue happened, and it may be helpful to see what changes were applied recently. So how can we version data in Python? Do you have some kind of solution yourself? Now, do you use some kind of tool? So I used Quilt recently, which allows you to version individual files and folders together, packed into something called packages. And you can do that using Python methods. And where do you store your files? You store them in the cloud, in the S3 storage. You can use it, for example, to version single file as a dataset, CSV dataset file, or for example entire folder where you have several model files. So for example, you have a PyTorch model, then you have some vocabulary, and then you have some embeddings or something like that, and all together the folder could be stored in S3. The files and their versioning information lives in AWS, so there are separate folders for this. So so there's one specific folder for just the Quilt versioning files, and then the rest of the files are the corresponding main folders. And you can reference also the specific version. So you are then, once you version the files or the folder, you can then pull back the specific version which is specified by top hash. So you present the package name, you present the top hash, and you can get the specific version. How does it work in S3? Well, they use S3 bucket versioning. So how do we do this? For example, so you can, I have a code here that you can try for yourself, but I will go through it right now. So to try Quilt, you first install the package Quilt free. You create your S3 bucket that will be used by Quilt, and probably makes sense to have just a specific S3 bucket. And then you turn on S3 versioning. So this part is critical. Without S3 versioning, you will run into issues. I will mention it later. So for example, we can have a local folder where we have where we store the local copies of the files versioned in S3. We have some S3 bucket for the Quilt, and we have a single file that we'd like to version. Well, the unit of storage in Quilt is a package, as I mentioned. Each package has a name, so when you want to download a piece of data, you specify the name as well as the version. Unfortunately, the names of in the Quilt are quite limited, so each name has to be basically two alphanumeric strings which are separated by a slash, for example. And usually I think they recommend that the first alphanumeric string is a sort of name, and the second one is what was created. So this could be like your username, and this could be like your package. So this is very limited, and it seems that it would be better designed to allow more flexibility here, for example, without a slash, and so on. So that seems to be a slight downside. Okay, so here I create some testing dataset, I store it in the file, and then I create the Quilt package by calling package constructor. I set the file into the package, so I provide a path to the file and the name within the package. So within the package, the file could have a different name. It's probably a bad idea to rename it, but this gives you an option. Probably best is just to version entire folders. But yes, so okay. And then, you know, this still happens in local. It's just something happened in your Python Python environment, Python runtime. So if you want to actually say, okay, commit this as in Git, you would push the package into the remote. There is actually the Git analogy is not complete because there are no commits here, or as far as I understand, each file is sort of independent. It doesn't build on the previous versions. Okay, so we push the package, and we get a hash. So during I think before the file is pushed, hash is calculated from all the files that are part of the package. So you can then be sure that this version will be unique, or, you know, unless there is hash collision, right? And you can use then this hash to download the file in the future. So how do you download the file back? So on the package, you can call a static method install. So you specify package name, you specify the registry, that's your S3 bucket, you specify the hash, and then you say where would you like to download the package. So right now I'm using always the same folder where I sort of cache my files, and it could be, for example, your temporary folder of your Linux machine, which would be then cleared up on restart, but it could be like a permanent position. Well, if you already have the same version on a local machine, which was the case here, Quilt doesn't seem to download the files again. The trick here is that it doesn't seem to actually tell you that you already had all the right versions, but you can see from the download speed that it would be downloading unrealistically fast. Well, there was this one surprise that I experienced with the Quilt, and that was that it silently failed me, right? It was this. So I didn't know that I need to turn on the S3 versioning. I haven't seen it anywhere in the documentation. So I, for a while, I was using Quilt without the S3 versioning. Well, and it seemed to work, but it was always downloading the latest versions of all files without any warning, or I haven't noticed any warning. And yeah, I tried. I was guessing that this is not the right behavior, right? It wasn't making sense. So for time, I sort of understood that I need to turn on the S3 versioning, and it wasn't that easy. I also needed to remove local cache. You can do that with these commands. And yeah, so don't forget to turn on S3 versioning as well. So the verdict is, apart from the initial hiccup, Quilt works so far well for me. And yeah, so try it. And yeah, good luck. See you next time. You can as well subscribe by mail. I also post these posts on the Twitter and or on YouTube as well. If you have, do you skill yourself? I would be interested if you have some kind of tips that I could as well use, or others could use. So you can use comments or mail me. All right. So thanks, and see you next time.